My name is Jan Butler, and I want to say, first of all, I want to thank you for staying this late in the day. I'm really impressed that this many people are still here. That's great. Thank you. For those of you who don't know who I am, again, my name is Jan Butler. I'm a speech language pathologist. I got my degree, my bachelor's and my master's degrees from Purdue University. I've been working as a speech pathologist for about 28 years now. I've worked everywhere. I started out in the nursing homes. Not for me. I'm very much child-oriented, but I got that first year out of the way, certification year. And then I was a stay-at-home mom, and I worked out of my home doing freelance for a while. When my kids went back to school, I started out homeschooling them. Then we ended up putting them in a private school, and so I went to their school and I was their speech pathologist for a while and bartered tuition with them, which worked out very nicely. We've run the gamut of homeschooling, private school, public school. We've done the whole roller coaster thing. Each of my kids was so different and unique. I have one child who is on the autism spectrum. I have another child who didn't quite make the diagnosis, but is pretty darn close. And my third child's perfectly neurotypical and more than makes up for the social weaknesses of the other two. But he had horrible articulation errors when he was younger. So I had my hands full with my own kids as well. And so it was in my quest to help my daughter, who was diagnosed on the spectrum, when she was in third grade. There was nothing out there. She's 26 now, so we're talking, 15 years ago. There was nothing out there yet. She was at the very, very beginning wave of this autism diagnosis. There really was little out there, and so I started searching for everything I could. And in a couple of years, I took over 100 contact hours in autism, trying to understand how to help my own daughter. And with my education as a speech pathologist, it just kind of dovetailed together. I worked for several years. I worked for a couple of years for special school district, and then I went to the Archdiocese, and I worked for over 10 years for the Archdiocese. 3 years before I left, I helped them establish a school for children with autism, and worked there for a couple of years, and then I felt like the Lord led me to start my own business. And so 6 years ago, almost 7 now, I began Victory Speech Therapy and Autism Consulting. I don't exclusively work with kids with autism. I work with about half my caseload is neurotypical kids as well. But I have a lot of expertise in there. I've worked with and been exposed to kids with many, many disabilities, virtually everything out there I've worked with at some point in my life. I grew up with a sister that was blind and mentally retarded. Well, that was her diagnosis at the time. Now it's cognitively impaired. But so I've lived with it my entire life and been exposed to learning challenges forever. So I have a lot of experience and a lot of things that I've learned over the years, things that work, things that don't work, and every kid is unique. I probably will often use the word autism a lot, working with kids with autism, but please note that if your child is not autistic, a lot of these strategies work for them as well. I just get in the habit of saying that. So these are great for kids with any disability or none at all. Okay. So that's a little bit about me. One thing that's not on your handouts, did everyone get a handout? There's some more in the back if you did not. There's the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The acronym is DESE. I don't know if you are familiar with that. It's something that if you have a child with disabilities, you should be aware of, DESE. DESE is the organization that controls and organizes all of the education in Missouri. Okay, so just your regular ed classrooms as well as special ed. They have a website. I think it might be desi.org or something like that. You could Google it and find it. But they have a lot of information on parental rights and services that are legally yours in the state of Missouri. Of course, you have to do it through the public school, which is, we're not going to go into that discussion. but it's out there, okay? DESE came up with an educational plan for children with autism, and it's called MAGI. They love acronyms. MAGI, M-A-G-I, and I'm not even really sure what that stands for. I don't know if anybody really knows what it stands for, but it's MAGI, and there's 4 things that they said kids with autism need to learn in this order. First of all, they need to learn social skills. That is the number 1 thing. The second thing is they need communication skills, then behavior management, and lastly, academics. So the professionals that work with kids with autism feel like that's the hierarchy, that in the order they need to be taught. Schools don't necessarily do that, and even as parents, sometimes we get caught up and we have to teach them the academics. But if you don't deal with the social issues, if you don't deal with the behavior issues, they're not going to be able to work on the academics. If you don't work with their communication skills, those are the foundations before they can even begin working on academics. And I think that's true for kids with a lot of different disabilities. Okay, so learning styles. How does the autistic child learn? Autistic children tend to be very visual, and I see this across the board with many kids with learning disabilities. They tend to be very visual. They are very tactile, so they're very multimodality, not just listening. They're very concrete in their thinking, so teaching them in a concrete way is important, and they're very literal. All right, so those are 4 key terms to remember teaching them, as well as just in everyday life, speaking to them in concrete ways, explaining things using visual stimulation. That really helps get the message across. A very important thing, well, for everybody, is rewards and motivation. You got to motivate your kid to want to learn, to want to do what's expected of them. So think about things that motivate your child. What kind of things can you reward them with or encourage them with? It's not a bribe, it's an encouragement tool, to help them do what's expected of them. And if you think about it, we all do it for ourselves as well. I know there's many days when I'm like, all right, if I get all the bathrooms cleaned and I get the floors vacuumed, I'll sit down and watch a Hallmark movie. We all do it. So kids need it as well. All right. They probably need it more than we do, especially if they have any learning challenges, because it's very difficult for them to learn. So using something to motivate them, encourage them, and reward them for trying is really important. So it could be food, it could be toys, it could be a movie, a puzzle, books, Legos, whatever you think is encouraging to them. There's a principle of reinforcement called the PREMAC principle, and that's pairing a disliked activity with a liked activity. All right, so if they really don't like math, that's when you want to give them some reward or incentive at the end of math for finishing what's expected of them. The more an activity is disliked, the greater the reward has to be. So if Legos are okay, I'll play with Legos for a while, that wouldn't be a real motivator. But if the Xbox is the thing that they would die for, then that's what you want to save for the really challenging things. The one important thing, though, is if Xbox is the thing they're working for, they don't get Xbox any other time for any other reason than finishing their math homework. Because if they do, they're going to wait it out. Well, I know if I wait out long enough, when the school day's over at 3 o'clock, I get to play Xbox anyway, so why do it now? Okay? So as a parent, you're going to have to control whatever that motivator is. It has to be big, it has to be important to them, worth the effort that they're going to put in for it. Does that make sense? Okay. I want to talk just real briefly about sensory integration. Many kids with learning disabilities also have sensory issues. Are you familiar with the term sensory integration, sensory issues? Some are, some aren't. Okay. Dealing with sensory issues is really important. If your child has sensory issues, especially if they're on the autism spectrum, calming their sensory system down is going to help them learn better, be calmer, be happier. Okay. I'm going to skip over some of this for right now because I get really into the sensory aspect of it, and then I don't have time for anything else. So I really want to get to the academic part of it, and then we'll come back to sensory, okay? But I did want to mention sensory and behaviors, negative behaviors that kids display. Just keep in the back of your mind all the time that behaviors are messages. If your child is acting out, if they're throwing things, if they're stomping their feet, it's a message they're trying to send you that they can't necessarily verbally communicate. All right? So, getting to the root of what their behaviors are and dealing with that, calming that down, and then they'll be able to sit and learn. Okay? And a lot of times it stems from sensory issues. All right, so we'll come back to that. All right, the one thing I want to talk about is organizing your day. You being organized is going to be the key to having your child be successful. Kids with learning disabilities are often very disorganized and just have a hard time planning things out. Remember, kids with autism are very literal. They also cannot predict, and they thrive on routine. So if you can have your school day be a routine every day, same time, same pattern, that's going to be calming and peaceful to your child. Sometimes you think, oh, let's stir it up a little bit for something fun. That's not fun. Fun is knowing what's coming next. And because they can't predict, that's why routines are so calming to them. They like routines. They like doing things over and over in the same pattern. All right? So having some type of a schedule is critical. I use this type of a schedule in my office. We used this in a school that I worked at. And just having little cards. You can make this as complex or as easy as you want, okay? I like to color code things, and unfortunately, this is not color coded real well today, so I apologize for that. I brought the wrong cards. But what you start with is just an index card. This says reading on it, and we're going to pretend this is a red reading card, okay? If they can read, you just need the word. If they are still young enough, you might need to put a picture on there to help them understand. All right, so you've got your red reading card, and then you have your little cart here, and you have a red drawer that goes with the red reading card, and there's a little red label here that's Velcroed on that says reading. And inside the drawer will be all the reading things your child needs for that lesson for the day. You put their book in there, you'll put, whatever manipulatives you might be using, everything will be in this drawer. So you can say to your child, oh, what's the first thing on the list? And they'll say reading, and they take the card out, and they put it in a basket, and then you say, go get your red reading drawer, and they get their drawer, and they sit down at their table or the desk, whatever you work at, and they do whatever is in that drawer. And they know that when they finish that, reading is done. Okay, and then they can take this, if they've got worksheets, so even older kids, this works great. Put their work in there. What's next? Go get the drawer, sit down, start the work, whatever is in here, okay? When they're done with the work, they just take the drawer and put it like in a laundry basket. And then at the end of the day, you pick up the laundry basket and you can grade their papers. You can put in the stuff for tomorrow and put it back in the drawer or in the cart. Then you say, okay, you finished that? Great, what's next? Math. Okay, go get your math drawer. So they pull out the card, get their math drawer. There's their math book. Attached to the math book are the pages that they need to do. And of course, the math book has an orange cover on it. So everything's color coordinated. You could have folders in there that are the same color. You can have pens and pencils. You can have spiral notebooks, and make everything color coordinated, and that helps them be organized. And they're like, I can't find my math notebook. Okay, well, what color is it? Orange. All right, well, let's look for something orange. Usually they can find it. Or if they put it in the wrong drawer, hey, this green drawer has an orange notebook in it, and helping them learn to organize their things. So kids with ADD, this is invaluable for helping them stay organized and know where things are. All right, I'm going to back up a minute to Now I'm going to talk about the schedules. Okay. So you have everything you're going to do for the day. You can, if you want to, depending on your child's level and how much they rely on this, you can put in things like bathroom breaks, doctor's appointment, speech therapy, any place that they have to go throughout the day. Then they know that when they get to the end of this, their day is done. Then the time is free for themselves. Okay? So they know that this is their school day. So they're not constantly, when is school over? How much more do I have to do? It's not that abstract confusion to them. They're very, it works amazingly well for them. You can also put on reinforcements. So I just have cards that might say puzzle. So, and that was next to language. So when you finish language, then you can do a puzzle, all right? Or 15 minutes computer time. You can also put these things in the drawer. So when they finish the work in the drawer, they see what their reward is. If it's a snack or something like that, you can put it in the drawer. When you finish the work, then you can have the, sucker or whatever it is you're giving them. Of course, you have to be aware that they're not eating the snack when you're not looking to. They're very tricky. So anyway, I don't know, hopefully you can see this, but it's just a pocket chart, and I just bought this at a teacher store, okay? They're not expensive, it's like $7, and you can get colored index cards to go with it. Your organization system can be as elaborate as you want it to be. This I used for older kids, and this is also at the teacher store, and it holds file folders. So you can still have this schedule here, and the orange drawer is math, so I put an orange label on this, or you can buy orange color-coded folders if you want to. So this one I actually colored the label orange. This one for reading, I just used a red marker to write reading. And then you can put their work in here, if it's just worksheets or whatever, or page numbers of what they have to read in a book or whatever their assignment would be. So that works well for the older kids. Then there's the schedule of not the school day, of getting ready for school. After school, what are they going to do? And again, they rely heavily on schedules. Oh, this is another type of pocket. This comes with the charts. I personally don't use these because they have clocks on them. And if you say you're going to start math at 9 o'clock and you're still doing dishes from breakfast at 9 o'clock, they're going to have a meltdown. Or if you say you're going to, start reading at 9:45, but math is still going on, then they're going to have a meltdown because, no, I have to stop math because it's time for reading. So I don't like to use things with clocks for that reason, but I do use the time timer. Are you guys familiar with time timer? This is wonderful because you set it for however many minutes you want. And you can tell them, okay, I want you to do reading for 15 minutes. When this is up, your reading's over. And that's great for kids who are not motivated or just don't want to get things done. Let's see if you can get this done in 15 minutes. Then you can have a break. If you can get it done before the red disappears, then you get to have a break. Otherwise, you have to keep working at it. All right, so have some kind of motivator for them. The other thing I like about this is it doesn't buzz or ding or anything. A lot of other timers, you hear the tick, 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 brrr, and it startles kids. This is totally silent and it doesn't have a bell. So you have to kind of be watching for when it stops. Because sometimes when I was teaching, I'd get distracted working with one kid and go, hey, you've been on that computer really long. You were supposed to stop when the timer ended, and they don't. So you kind of have to be aware of that as well. But they also have little ones about this big that you can set, on their desk or by their table where they're sitting. This one hangs on a wall, which I like, or sits on a table real big as well.
Can you tell us the name of that?
Time timer. They have a watch now too. They've got a whole bunch of different ways that they use it now. I've used this for so many years and absolutely love it. And I always said, if I ever meet the lady who invented this, of course, a lady, right? I'm no offense to the men in the room. I'm going to hug her. And I happened to be at a convention last year and I met the lady who designed it. I'm like, I'm going to hug you. And she was like, I think she was on the spectrum. Anyway, so that's wonderful. I really love the time timer. Okay, so a couple different ways to organize as well. This was a really simple one I made for my daughter at the very, very beginning. And I just put Velcro on here with everything she needed to do in the morning and at night, and she could pull it off and stick it in the Ziploc bag. You know, very simple. Doesn't take much money or effort or anything. This is another one that we used with another student, and we just wrote everything that she needed to do, and then we had happy faces, and she would take the happy face off when she finished it. When she got to like reading, it says computer 15 minutes, so when she finished her reading, she could go do computer time for 15 minutes, peel that off. And then on the back, there were Velcro here, so they peel it off and stick it on the Velcro on the back. Okay. So some of these are just real simple. You don't have to be elaborate. You don't have to spend a whole lot of money on them. This is another one that I like. It's a doorknob thing, and you can get these at pack of 10 of these at Hobby Lobby for just a few bucks. And clothespins. So you have your to do and you're done, and so they take off the clothespin after they do it and put it on the done side. And this is kind of the same thing, but I have the morning routine on this side, and then I have the evening routine on this side, and they just take the clothespin off as they do it. And you can have baskets or something like that around for them to throw them in. Not throw them in, place them nicely in. If you say throw them in, they will. That was one of the things when my daughter was in 5th grade, and she was in private school. And the teacher in her class didn't believe there's a such thing as learning disabilities, and they thought she was just a poorly disciplined child. And we were very strict disciplinarians, so that really bothered me when she told me that. But one day the teacher, it took all her energy to sit at her desk, and she was doing some writing, and the teacher walked by and said, "That's really messy," and she crumpled up the paper and said, "Throw this away and start over." So my daughter's like trying not to break into tears. She's in 5th grade, right? And so she takes the paper and she throws it towards the trash can. And the teacher came totally unglued. At the end of the day, she comes running out to my car, "Oh my God, you wouldn't believe what your daughter did." And I'm like, what was it today? And she said she threw this paper across the room, and I asked her about it. I'm like, "Well, what did you tell her to do?" "I told her to throw it away." "Well, what did she do?" "Well, she threw it across the room." "Well, where was the trash can?" "On the other side of the room." "Well, she was doing what you said. I'm telling you, she's very literal. She was trying to please you. You told her to throw it away, and she did." She's like, "No, no, 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 no. Everybody in 5th grade knows that that's not what you mean." And I'm like, "No." Anyway, so you have to be very literal with your kids, and when they take you literally, not get upset because it was actually your fault and not their fault. So going back to the color coding thing, you can choose what color you want to put things. You can have them have some input in the color coding system. If they have a horrible class, like math is their worst subject, but they love the color orange, make it orange. It'll be just that much nicer for them, or help them figure out what colors to put. They like routine, so usually I'll say you can have your child help you with the original pattern of what classes come in what order. But you have to put some thought into that as well, because if they have their best attention first thing in the morning, you want to do their hardest classes first, that they need the most attention for. If they're stressed out by the afternoon, you want to give them easier things that will be more calming. But you can help them guide you in deciding the order, but then keep it in that way. Don't switch it around every day. It's best to keep it in the same order because they like routine. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the classes and different curriculums that I like to recommend. Now, I've worked in schools for many years. These are just some, there's so many different curriculums out there. These are ones that I'm personally familiar with, that I've used, and that I like. Every child is unique, so it might not work for your child. But reading, one of my favorite programs for reading is called SPIRE, and it's an acronym, and I don't know what it stands for, but it's SPIRE. The lady who developed this actually is a teacher here in St. Louis, and the Westminster Christian Academy, that whole big thing, there's their elementary school has a special ed department, and she works in that special ed department. And so she created this SPIRE program. I love it because it is multimodality. It ties in phonics with tactile manipulatives, and spelling and writing are all kind of tied in together. Your reading words are your spelling words, and I've seen amazing results with it. The one drawback to Spire is that you have to be trained in it. Even if you can find a Spire box out there with all the stuff, it's very overwhelming to look at it. But it's a one-day training, and you're like, whoa, this is great. And it's really easy to do it, okay? So in 1 hour session, you go through reading words, writing words, spelling words, listening to words and sentences, writing them in a sentence. Even the beginning kids start writing in sentences pretty quickly, okay? My first year teaching this program, I didn't teach reading, but I worked with the teachers that do. And I do phonemic awareness as a speech pathologist, and what I do just dovetails with this program beautifully. But I remember these two twin girls that were in 5th grade could not read a word, literally zero. Sometimes they recognized their names and sometimes they didn't. By Christmas time, they were reading little, like 1st, 2nd grade level books. And by the end of the year, they were reading chapter books. I mean, it just clicked because of the manipulatives and the repetition. So what they do is they start out with these little blocks like this, and you have a block for each sound in the word. And it teaches kids to hear all the different sounds in the words so they can begin to separate sounds and separate words, and it's just like all the foundational stuff. So if you had the word cook, okay, you would have, I can't do this so you can see it, but you'd have C, or you'd have k, k. So you'd have 3 blocks, and then the child would touch them. K, k. Great, how many sounds in cook? 3, right. So you start out just by listening and hearing, and then they learn all the rules and the phonics and stuff. And they'll teach it systematically. You know, the sound can be O-O, it could be O-U, it could be, all the different ways you can pronounce that. But it just starts out by touching, sounding things out, and it builds up from there. So I really like Spire a lot. As far as math goes, there's a couple good programs out there. I really like Saxon Math. The thing I like about Saxon Math is the constant review and repetition. So they'll teach you a concept, and then the homework is like 25 questions, and 10 of them will be the new concept, and 15 are review from everything from the beginning of the year. So kids that need that constant repetition, Saxon is very good. And they teach things in a pretty concrete way as well. I like the way that was set up. For kids that would really even struggle with that, there's Touch Math and Matthew C. I've never used Matthew C. I've only had parents that have talked about it and have really liked it. But Touch Math starts out, kindergarten and goes all the way up through algebra. And I don't know how they do the higher ones. That's beyond me anyway. But so you start out, and each number has a dot on it. And so, and the number of dots obviously for the number. So 1 has 1 dot, 2, and so the kids would count 1, 2, that's the number 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so if you're teaching them to add, they would go 1 plus 2, okay, 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's 3. And so they'd write the number 3. And subtracting, you'd say the top number, 3, 2, 1. The answer is 1. So it's multimodality. It's touching, it's seeing, saying it out loud, repetition. So that has worked really well as for kids with learning issues as well. And again, I don't really know the Matthew C, but I've heard that that's really good. Language, I really like Shirley Grammar. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Shirley. The thing I like about Shirley Grammar, it starts out in, I think, first grade. I'm not sure if they have a kindergarten level or not. But they teach all your basic language rules with rhymes and jingles. And first graders will be looking at sentences and picking out nouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives, just by reciting these jingles. It's amazing. And because kids with autism and many kids with learning disabilities like rote memorization, routine, it's really good for them. It works great. So a first grader can say, recite the jingle. I used to know all of them. Can recite the jingle for an adjective. They might not quite understand the concept of what an adjective is, but they can say the jingle and they can pick it out in a sentence. And then as they get older, it actually starts clicking and understanding more. But the foundation is there. Okay, so they're building that foundation. And because when kids are younger, that's how they learn, is through rote memorization and jingles and rhymes and songs. That's why nursery rhymes rhyme, and nursery rhymes are in songs, because that's what attracts kids and that's what helps them learn. Okay, so this is a great program. I really like this as well. I really like a vocabulary program called Wordly Wise. And as a speech pathologist, I find this really, really helpful for teaching vocabulary because it teaches the words, it gives the definition, it gives you synonyms, it gives you antonyms, it teaches you to understand it in a story and multiple meanings, and it just uses the words in so many different ways. It really helps build their language skills very well, I think. Writing. Step Up to Writing is one of my favorite writing programs. Again, it's one of those that I think you might have to take a workshop to be able to use it effectively. I'm not sure if you can buy it without the workshop, but it's so easy to teach the basics of it. And that's what I have up here on the wall. I'm going to pass, or I'll just show you these. So you have your introduction sentence, you have your concluding sentence, which will be very similar, okay? And then you have your 3-star ideas. So you can have as many stars as you want, however many ideas you want in a paragraph. This is a pretty basic paragraph. Tell me 3 main points about your bedroom. Okay, so those are your 3-star ideas. And then the red rectangles are details. So explain to me, all right? So the child has a paper like this, and I just use little stickers on it, and they can put in their topic sentence. And as we go through this, I start out by doing it with them and writing on the board with them. And I use color-coded markers, so I use green, yellow, and red markers as well. So you have your topic sentence. My bedroom is cool. All right. Your first star idea. What do you like about your bedroom? Tell me one thing. I like the color. It's green. Okay, so let's write a sentence. My room is green. All right, now give me 2 details. What's great about green? Well, green's my favorite color. Okay, that's your first red box. It reminds me of playing in the grass. Okay, So that's your second red box. Now, we know you like the color of your room. What's another thing you like about your room? Well, I like it because all my favorite things are in there. Great, there's your second sentence. It has all my favorite things. Okay, what are some of those favorite things? Tell me one of them. It has all of my posters of my favorite rock bands. Okay, great, let's put that up there. Make that into a sentence. Oh, it has all my books and toys in there too. Great, there's your second red rectangle. Okay, so now we know you like your room because it's green and it has your favorite things. What's the third thing you like about your room? It's comfortable. Okay, great. My room is comfortable. Now, what do you like about that? My bed is really soft. Great. There's your next red rectangle. And I have my favorite beanbag chair in there. Perfect. There's your last red rectangle. And then your introductory sentence was, I really like my room. So your ending sentence is going to wrap all that up. Now you know why I like my room. And voila, they have, a 10-sentence paragraph when they didn't think they could write one. So it's very systematic. It's once you talk them through it once or twice and practice it with them, it clicks. And if you put the little stickers on their page, it helps them remember, and they start being able to do it independently really quickly. When they get a little older, that was the first one. Then I just kind of draw the shapes, okay? And then when they're comfortable with that, another thing you can do is just I don't know if you can even see that, I just took little dots with a marker and put the color-coded dots, okay? And then eventually they don't need anything. Now, if the child's younger, you can make it a 2-star paragraph. You can make it a 2-star paragraph with one red rectangle in each. As they get better, you can add, 4 stars or 5 stars. This is great for doing a research report because you'll do one paragraph on, each question they're going to answer in their research. And then let's put it together, and you've got all these different paragraphs to put together for your research report. So you can just keep adding on. You can make it as extensive or as simple as you want. Okay? Let's see, where am I? We did math and language and writing. Okay. We've got a couple minutes left. Let's go back and, do you have questions about any of this before I go into sensory?
I'm looking at a language program called Sing Spell Rewrite.
Yes. I've heard of it. I don't really know it real well. But again, it's because it's sing-song, it's like jingles and rhymes and stuff. I would suspect that would probably work real well because the kids learn real well with jingles and rhymes. Okay, so let's spend a few minutes talking about sensory issues. Oh, wait a minute, I've got a couple other things I forgot to show you. This is another type of schedule for them, and it's 2 paper plates, and kind of like the time timer that goes red. So they have all their different subjects on here, and then I need 2 hands. So, sorry, you can just turn the plate, and they can, see as each thing gets finished. Until they get to the end of the day. And any of this stuff, if you guys like at the end, if you want to come and take pictures of it with your phone so you remember, that's a real easy way. This is the same kind of thing, but this I actually made for a student for an after-school routine. And we have eat a snack, watch TV, do your homework, eat dinner, finish your homework, take a bath, quiet reading, and then bedtime. And so the same kind of thing, they can just slide it to finish. And the kids that I've used this with have been like, whoa. The parents are like, whoa, that's great. Just something that simple works so well. This is another reinforcement type thing that we used. And this is just a lizard, but you can get any picture off the internet that attracts your child, something that they're interested in. If they like vacuum cleaners, put a picture of a vacuum cleaner on here. And this has 5 dots on it. So we used this for a child who we were just trying to get him to sit in his desk. And every couple minutes, if he was sitting in his desk, we put a sticker on here. And when he finished it up, then he got a reinforcement activity. Or you can do it for each subject as the kid finishes it. And you can put as many dots as you want, depending on the level your child's working at, how difficult it is for them. If it's really difficult, you only want to start with a couple to really encourage them, and then add more dots every couple of weeks to make them work a little harder. But this is really simple. This is great if you're going to a doctor's office and you want them to sit still and be quiet in the waiting room. You can take one of these in your purse, and if you have an iPhone or something like that, you can set a timer for every 5 minutes. And if you're sitting quietly, when my timer goes off, I'll give you a check mark or a sticker, however elaborate you want to be. If you get all your check marks by the time we leave the doctor's office, we can go to Ted Drew's, something simple like that, okay? Or you can watch a movie when we get home, or whatever you want to do, okay? So these are so simple they can be taken with you, all right? This was another one. This was just all of their classes listed, and then I put a check mark next to it. The problem with this is you have to write it out every day. When I was doing this, computers weren't as easy accessible, but you can easily print things up on a computer and just put check marks by it. Make lists for everything. When we would have cleaning days, Saturdays would be house cleaning day. We would have a schedule for each kid. This is what you need to do. When you finish your schedule, you can go play, all right? My daughter, well, all my kids were driven once they saw what they had to do, and then they loved crossing it off. Morning routines, use a vis-a-vis, one of those dry erase kind of markers, or not the dry erase, but the ones that don't erase off, wet erase, on like the bathroom mirror or a grease pencil, and just write down everything they need to do in the morning so they can see it. If you want them to cross it off, they can, but they don't have to. You can just have that up kind of permanently, or print it out on the computer and stick it up in the bathroom or in their bedroom. When they really like to have lists of things and know what's expected of them. Usually, kids with autism are driven by knowing what's expected because they want to please. They just don't know what's expected. Okay. And even into high school, my daughter used to take her schedule and she carried it in her pants pocket the entire school year. By day 2, she had her schedule memorized, but it was just the security. And by Christmas time, that thing was falling apart. And we'd usually photocopy it a couple of times. But she had that in her pocket the entire year, just in case she'd forget where to go or what to do. It was a security blanket. So you think that they might know the schedule, and they probably do. They probably could tell it to you better than you could. But they love that security. Okay, I told you we get to sensory, and I keep talking. So, all right, so you have your 5 senses. Everyone knows that: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. Kids with autism, kids with many different kind of learning disabilities, kids with no learning disabilities can have sensory issues. Their brains just don't process what's coming in through their 5 senses the way typical children's do, or adults. All right, they could be hyposensitive, meaning they don't perceive the sensation to the intensity that they should. So an example of that might be smell, and you're cooking dinner and they have no clue that there's a smell around. They can't smell it. What do you smell cooking? I don't know. There's nothing. Or it could be hypersensitive, where they're like 3 rooms away and they're like, oh, that smells awful, So that could be with all of their senses. They could be hypersensitive or hyposensitive. And sometimes it's combined. and that's when it's really fun. So you have your child, especially touch is one of those that's hypersensitive and hyposensitive, where if you give them a light touch, they're like, ow, that hurt, but if you give them a deep hug, they're like, oh, that feels good. So that touch sensation is usually way out of whack. And that actually, it appears as though it's touch, but it actually is a different sense. And there's two other senses that we don't usually talk about with our five senses. One of them is proprioceptive, which is what we just talked about. That's proprioceptive, Proprioceptive, proprioceptive. And that sense is in your joints and your muscles. And it is deep pressure, just knowing where your body is in space, what your arms are doing, what your legs are doing. Kids that have difficulties with proprioception, you'll see them as the kids who like to jump. They like to hand flap. They bump into things. They're always falling out of their chair. And that's because they're craving that sensation. They're usually the ones that appear hyperactive, but it's because they're trying to get that sensory movement going. And so they are always moving, and they're the ones that drive teachers crazy because they're falling out of their chairs and they're pushing other kids or body slamming, things like that, to try and stimulate this sensation. We're doing just some simple things with them. We'll calm that down and calm them down. Okay? Things that really work well for them because they like to bounce and jump, sitting on a therapy ball, having a small trampoline available, wall push-ups where you stand against the wall and or floor push-ups as well. I like for the older kids, sit in your chair and put your hands under your rear end and just push up with your arms. And that gives you're stimulating all those joints and muscles, calms them down. Okay. Carrying heavy things. Hey, why don't you take this box of books up to mom's bedroom for me? Here, carry this laundry basket. It's too heavy for me. So carrying heavy things. It's amazing how calm they get doing those kind of things. Those are the kids who do well with a weighted vest or a weighted blanket on them. So those are just some strategies to try. Vestibular, that's in your inner ear, and that has to do with balance and coordination. And the kids who have their vestibular sense out of kilter are the ones who will be spinning, twirling, rocking back and forth. They're constantly moving, but it's more of a slow, methodical movement. Somersaults. My daughter could not spell to save her life, but if she was doing somersaults across the floor, she spelled with 100% accuracy. But you can't do that when you're in school. So it was really tricky. That's where homeschooling is great, because you can do a spelling test rolling across the floor, and because you know that they know it. And that's what we want, is to know that they know it. And eventually it clicks, but meet them at the level they're at. And if that's what it takes to get that part of their brain working, then do it. It's great. So those are the two senses that often are overlooked, and those are probably two of the ones that are most impacting on these kids. So I like to give kids sensory breaks throughout the day. When you do sensory time with kids, you need to do at least 15 or 20 minutes, and the effects of it last about 2 hours. So I actually put a little card on the schedule that says sensory break, and that's their time. And then you can have another little schedule like that with things that that would help your child, okay? And they have to do those. Trampoline for 5 minutes, therapy ball for 5 minutes, swing for 5 minutes. All right, and there's your 15. Okay, so knowing what is helpful for your child. I also love fidget objects. And so I always have a drawer full of fidget objects for kids. And when they come into my room, they can come in and grab a fidget object. My rules are number one, you have to respect my things and don't break them. Number two, nothing ever is airborne. If it's airborne, it's gone. And when I have multiple kids, you don't trade or look at each other's objects because it's supposed to help you pay attention and focus. And if it's not, then it goes back in the drawer. Usually, if you take it away once or twice, they're fine with it. Then they start knowing that you mean business. Okay? So, just having strict rules and boundaries for it is very helpful. I have things that they can chew on. I have things that they can hold. I have things that stretch. There's all kinds of different. I personally avoid things that make noise and flash because, number one, the noises drive me crazy when I'm trying to teach. But also the flashing thing, then that becomes a distraction to other kids and sometimes even to themselves. They start, getting into that. So I prefer quiet things. But some kids thrive with that stimulation of the noise or the flashing lights. So if that works for your kid, then that would be great. I also take sensory things with me. My daughter had her travel pack, and she had a little fanny pack. And in the fanny pack, she would have a pair of sunglasses, a pair of earplugs, a fidget object, some gum. Trying to remember if there's anything else. Oh, one of these therapy brushes, which that's a whole long story in itself, which we can talk about another time. And anytime we went somewhere, she took her sensory bag with her. And so if we're going to a restaurant, she would get overstimulated with all the people walking and the lights and the sounds and everything. So she would take her little sensory bag, and when we sit down, she'd put her little sunglasses on, and she would put earplugs in her ears, and she was fine. She didn't have a meltdown, where previously she would because of all the stimulation coming in. She was very oral. To this day, she's 26 and still puts things in her mouth. We tried so hard to break that before I understood sensory, but it was a sensory thing. And so we got gum for her, and she really liked like that athletic sports gum because it's really hard and chewy. And so we would keep that in her sensory bag, and that would just be calming to chew on that gum and just. So if your child has difficulty outside the home, take a sensory bag with you and teach them to use it at home first. So when they go out, and wearing sunglasses and the little foam earplugs that you really can't see is what we would use. Some people use the real big ones because they're really noise canceling, and that's okay if your child's comfortable with it. But my daughter was a little older and wanted to be more discreet, so it was less obvious. Okay, we only have like 5 minutes left, and I want to be able to answer some questions. So, questions?
With your reward system, when you're doing dots and stuff, do you ever move it up to it takes a few days to get rewards, or do you always do just immediate or within the same day reward?
That's a really good question, and it depends on your child. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish with them. This usually was pretty immediate, this little worksheet. And that's how it's designed, is for extinguishing negative behaviors as quick as possible or giving a reward as quick as possible. If you wanted to do like schoolwork, and maybe for each drawer that they finished, they got a marble, and when they got 50 marbles in the jar, then they got some bigger reward. If your child's ready for something like that, that's fine. But if they need those short-term rewards to get motivated, then you need to do it sooner. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
What about for nonverbal children? I have a son with apraxia. And when he was younger, it didn't matter so much, but now that he has a younger brother that's talking, he's realized that he's supposed to be. So he gets his meltdowns are from frustration.
Right.
So, and sometimes I'm just as frustrated because I want to know what he's saying and he wants me to know, you know what I'm saying? And so
Right.
how, ways to help with those kind of meltdowns?
Um, you know, I would just try to get them to have some mode of communication. And if verbal is not working, having some type of augmentative communication if he's really frustrated. Because I'm a speech therapist, I'm very pro-verbal and I really try to get kids to talk. But it doesn't hurt to have a secondary or using sign language or anything like that that might help him as he's developing his language and improving, just having some way for him to communicate. And then rewarding him for that. I like the way that you used your words instead of screaming. That's great. And so having some kind of a reward system like this. If you use your words, you get a sticker chart and then, or get a sticker on the chart. And if you can get 5 of these, then, have some kind of reward for him for at least trying to communicate. Yes.
Do you have any suggestions about tougher environments? The doctor, when you're getting shots, the dentist, open up your mouth, really tough sensory things.
Yes.
My son doesn't care about stickers.
And stickers doesn't work for everybody. Are you familiar with social stories? Okay, everyone write down social stories. And Carol Gray, I think it's Gray is the spelling of her name. Carol Gray developed a technique called social stories, which is a way to, a very short story that you write to help your child predict what's going on, what are the negative behaviors he's done in the past, what can he replace them with, and why. Okay, so you're basically going to have like 4 to 6 sentences. It's a very short story. So today I'm going to the doctor. I don't like going to the doctor, and I usually scream and hit the doctor. So whatever his negative behaviors are. And you only want to pick 1 to 3 behaviors. You don't want to do too many at a time. Okay, 1 or 2 is usually best. It's important that I go to the doctor. Instead of yelling and kicking, I can talk in an inside voice and say, I don't like that. Or I can squeeze my stress ball instead of hitting. When I do these things, the doctor will be very pleased, mom will be proud of me, and we'll go to Ted Drew's. Sorry, I keep going to that. And I don't even like Ted Drew's. My pediatrician was right across the street from Ted Drew's, so for some reason, those two go together. So it's just a very short story, and what you would do is you'd begin reading that to him a couple of days before you go to the doctor, and then definitely the day, like when you're leaving to go to the doctor's. Then when you're sitting there at the doctor's office, you remember our story? What were you supposed to do instead? Can you pick one of your good behaviors or one of the, positive behaviors that we talked about? And oftentimes, it's not going to work perfectly the first time. Sometimes it does. But usually that predicting for them, giving them the replacement behavior, because when they're, that fight or flight mode, they're in that constantly. So they're going to constantly go to the first thing they can think of, and that's to protect themselves. So they're going to hit or kick or scream. But if you give them a replacement behavior instead, here's what you can try, and think about whatever the situation is. You know best what are appropriate replacement behaviors that you want them to do. Oftentimes they go to that because it's like, oh, okay. Did you have a question?
I was going to have a suggestion about that situation
Sure.
specifically. One thing that we have found with our daughter is making sure she knows ahead of time, even if it's a situation she hates.
Yes.
Don't ever let her be surprised that you showed up to the doctor to get a flu shot. Don't
Right.
ever let that happen. Always
Right.
let her know, Katie, we're going to the doctor today and you're going to get a shot in the arm. She might not be
Right.
happy about it, but having a kid be surprised about something bad when they have autism, it tends to be a whole lot worse than giving
Yes.
them time to process.
And that's where the predictability, what I was saying, That's exactly what that is. So letting them know in advance, that's perfect. That's exactly, that's huge right there in helping them. Okay, and unfortunately, we have to stop, but I can answer some more questions as I'm kind of cleaning up. Thank you so much.